On today's show, my dear friend and former colleague, Sloane Heffernan. Sloane is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a former anchor and television reporter who bravely left broadcast journalism in 2021 to start her own company as a brand journalist. A fun sidebar, she is also a former New England Patriots cheerleader who performed at the Super Bowl. And she's a wife. A mother of 3 humans and 2 dogs. Sloane, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. This is fun, Amanda.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you today. So we're going to talk about your company in a minute, but I need to understand this transformation that you made from cheerleader to television journalist. How did that happen?
Well, it was an interesting journey. I think that I was lost. If I'm being completely honest with you, I had just graduated from high school and college wasn't a part of my future at the time. And I grew up going to dancing school, and that is something that I was passionate about. And my husband, then boyfriend at the time, had seen in the Boston Globe that they were bringing back the cheerleaders to Foxborough Stadium. And he said, wow, maybe this is something that you would be interested in doing. So my mom and I jumped on a bus. I was 18 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And we drove to Boston on that bus and auditioned with hundreds of other women. And at the end of the day, I was one of, I think, 22 at the time to make the squad. And I was the youngest person on the squad at the time. And it really opened my eyes to a whole new world because I grew up in a very blue-collar town where a lot of people don't typically leave. And I didn't know where I was going, but I met all of these incredible women who were doing incredible things. There was one cheerleader who was studying to become an oncologist. There was a CPA, there was a lawyer, school teachers. I mean, you name it. These women were older than me and very accomplished, and I saw a life outside of my hometown.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the potential, right? You saw a potential to do something else, to go on to higher education, to go on to another career. And so talk about how did you get from cheerleading to the next step, which I assume was college?
Yes, so I was inspired by these women. I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I saw these sports reporters on the sidelines and I thought, I bet they're making more money than I am because at the time we would make $50 a game. And I knew I loved being there on the sidelines and I saw a potential for a career. And so I decided to go back to community college and then ultimately transfer to Emerson College in Boston, a well-known school for broadcast journalism, and quickly realized that I didn't love sports as much as I needed to pursue that avenue. And so I made the transition into local news.
And, you know, you and I have similar paths in the local news, which is, you know, to move up, you move out. So you go to these stations, you start at smaller markets, and then you move up. So what did you do before you ended up in Raleigh, North Carolina?
So I worked at various affiliates in the Southeast, and I left Boston because that's a big market. That's, I think, market number 4. It's usually
it's very
on
tough
population.
to break into when you are a young journalist, for sure.
Yes, you have to start in a smaller market. And so my husband got a job in the South, and I tried to get a job in the South, but my New England accent held me back for about a year and a half. So I had to work wicked hard
to get rid of the accent.
To get a job in the South. And so my first job was in Albany, Georgia. And I spent a lot of money trying to get rid of my accent to fit in Albany, Georgia. We bought an American-made car once I got there and an English bulldog. But still, when we opened our mouths, they could tell.
People knew right away.
Yes.
You were from away, as we said in Maine when I lived in Maine. Actually, when I first moved here, I left a message for somebody and she called me back, and this was back when we had, you know, we didn't even have cell phones, so I think it was like a hardline voicemail. And she said, "This is Wanda Spaken, da 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 da." So I called back and I said, I'm calling for Wanda Spaken. It was Wanda speaking. Yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. So that was one of my first Southern mess ups when I first came here. So you got here, you started working in Raleigh, and then you start a life, right? And I think that's what happens to a lot of us in jobs, where we go somewhere not knowing that, oh my gosh, my life's going to start here, right? Mm-hmm. And you started a life, right? You had 3 kids. And so this kind of became this became home for you.
Yes, yes.
And what was that like, the middle years, I call them, when you're just trying to keep your head above the water, you're juggling everything, 3 kids and a demanding career. I mean, that was tough. And I think at one point you and I were job sharing. So at one point you kind of pulled back on the job stuff, right? Tell us about that decision.
I would say those middle years were, as we would say in New England, wicked hard. They were wicked hard. Yeah, they were really hard. You know, it's really difficult. I found, and I can only speak for myself, going from, a professional career and working your way up the ranks and then making that decision to have children and trying to balance it all. I found it to be incredibly difficult, and I wasn't doing anything well.
Yeah, I kind of still look back on those years and think the same thing.
Yes, you're trying to give, if you're the type of person who likes to give 100% in the workforce, suddenly you have these young children and you just can't. I mean, the lack of sleep alone. And so I do remember that moment where our lives merged, where I remember talking to you and you were in a similar situation and being an accomplished author and having so much on your plate and you beautiful girls, and saying to me, I can't keep going at this rate.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way, and I think that's why it's so important for us to share our stories. And we decided to go in and talk to our news director and ask about a job sharing situation. And I think at the time that was very rare.
It was really unusual, I remember.
Especially in the news business,
Sure.
because you're expected to give it all, morning, noon, night, overnights,
All the
holidays,
time.
weekends,
Sure.
you name it. They want you to be there because that's when news happens. And I really look back at it on that, and I think how grateful I am that
we were able to do that.
That we were able
for
to
a
do
period
it.
of time, sure.
And I do think a lot of it had to do with the fact that you had been a seasoned veteran at WRAL, and they recognized your value. I was new just coming in, so I think I really benefited from us going in there together. But I will say that WRAL was so great at allowing us to, in essence, share a full-time job.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I think, we both kind of morphed into different situations. But at one point, and I love this story, you and your husband were coming back from a vacation. You were on an airplane, and I think was it a cocktail napkin that you wrote this on? You had gotten to a point in your career where you were ready to make a change. You felt ready. And what did you write on that napkin?
So I know it was an envelope.
It was an envelope.
It was an envelope, like a bill that I had in my wallet. And I think I still have it in the glove box of my minivan to this day. I guess I got to clean that out because that was years ago. That might have been like 10 years ago. And yeah, I was at a crossroads, and I just felt like the news business was taking its toll on me. And I wanted to change, and we were in Vegas. My husband was on a business trip, and I got to tag along. And I met with a girlfriend of mine who was also a recovering broadcast journalist.
Okay, I love that, recovering, yeah.
And she had left the news business, and at the time, she was working as a life coach. And I just told her that, you know what? And I'm a big believer of putting it out into the universe.
Yeah.
Put it out into the universe. You never know what you're going to get back.
Absolutely.
And I just said, geez, I'm not happy anymore doing what I'm doing. And I don't know what to do next.
Yeah.
And she said, you've got to ask yourself some important questions, and really basic questions. At the time, I thought they were incredibly basic. She's like, well, what do you like to do? And I'm like, what do you mean, what do I like to do?
Right.
What interests you? And I struggled with that, because I had 3 young kids and I'm burning the candle at both ends. And, I hadn't thought about myself for a while. And I said, food. I really love to eat. I mean, if you want to know, I really like to eat and I really like food. And she goes, okay, all right, well, let's build off that.
With food.
Yes, and then she also had mentioned, or I had mentioned to her that I do love the storytelling element. I love meeting people and talking to people and asking questions. And so she said, we'll really lean into that. And so I didn't know really what to do with that. But on the plane ride home, I was talking to my husband, and he's in the food industry. And so we were just talking about different avenues.
Sure.
Combining food with storytelling.
Yeah.
And so that's where idea was born, that I saw something outside of local news, telling stories potentially about food, but I didn't know how that would look. But I even have like some names of different businesses on that envelope.
What was there a headline on this envelope?
It was just a matter of, I knew that it would be something that would be about storytelling and involving the food industry.
But like a timeline in terms of like, I'm done.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It was just an idea at that point.
Just some ideas, some names.
So how many years after you wrote on that envelope did you make the change?
I'm embarrassed to say, because I vacillated for years, more than 5 years. I thought about it. And if I really think about it, I think that was around my 40th birthday, and I didn't leave local news until around my 50th. So I would say nearly a decade.
Yeah. And did you find the envelope again? Is that what spurred you, or what was it?
COVID.
Okay.
I think so many of us did a lot of soul searching during COVID. And I thought to myself, if not now, when? When?
My yoga teacher just said that the other day. If not now, when? I love that.
Yeah. And what happened was that I realized that I was staying in local news because of the relationships primarily.
Sure.
And that during COVID, we would go out every day, as you know, with a photographer and tell a story. And part of that journey would be driving to and from, back and forth places, and really connecting with that person you're working with, that partnership. And then during COVID, we weren't able to be together.
Yeah.
And so many of the interviews that I was doing, they were on Zoom in the back of my minivan by myself.
And we weren't coming into a newsroom and sharing with each other. I mean, you and I we called our row High Road Lane. There were a group of us, and we would, talk about our stories, share our funny stories about our families. I mean, it was kind of like going to the locker room in high school, is the way I look at it. You would be excited to come in there and connect with people, and we did lose that.
And we covered heavy stories.
Sure.
We always have, and so there's something about being able to talk about it, and it's
decompress.
Decompress, thank you. Decompress with that other person. And sitting in the back of my minivan covering heavy news about a pandemic really weighed heavy on my soul.
I think I felt that as well. And then the lack of connection with our colleagues. So you left and you started your own company. So tell us, what is it all about? What is it called? And what do you do?
It's called Story More. And it is a brand storytelling, content creation company where I work with organizations, businesses, and nonprofits to tell their unique stories.
On video?
Primarily on video, yes. We create a lot of video content, and then I also work with them one-on-one about crafting their narrative, whether it be for external communication or internal communication, because I say that there are other people in the marketplace doing what you're doing, selling what you're selling, but no one shares your unique story.
The way you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What differentiates yourself from the competition? I know there's a lot of content creation companies out there, but I also know no one has my background, no one shares my unique story, and I can bring something unique to the table, just as they bring something unique to the table as well.
Okay, so this is the $1 million question. How does it feel? You've made this transformation. You've made this big life transition that was probably really scary at the time. How does it feel? I mean, how many years out are you, and how does it feel to be where you are now?
The only way I can describe it is, do you remember watching Oprah, the Oprah show, and she would stand up there and go,
yes.
with arms in the air,
yes.
like freedom. It feels so freaking good. Can I say that?
Yes, you can say freaking. Yeah, it's a podcast.
It feels so good and so liberating, and it feels great to help organizations and nonprofits. It feels great to tell good stories.
Yeah.
And
to be a girl boss.
Yes.
You are your own boss.
It's exciting and terrifying and super fun. Yes.
One of the things, not to bring this down from this really high moment, but one of the things that you and I talked about off mic, and we've both experienced this, during all of these transitions, life stuff happens, right? Life continues to go on. Stuff happens with your kids. Stuff happens with your spouse. Stuff happens in your family. And you, in the past few years, have lost both parents.
Yes.
How has that affected you as a woman, as a daughter, and as a mother, as a wife, and as a business person? How has that, informed you and also made it more difficult at times?
It's been incredibly challenging. And I will also say, if you zoom out and when you can move through that grief, that you realize there's so many lessons in grief. And I'm so grateful for those lessons. It's been really difficult, first losing my mom and then losing my dad less than 6 months ago. And these were really important people in my life, like my biggest cheerleaders. And you feel like you lose an anchor,
to the world.
Yeah.
I got it. My mom died 12 years ago, and I just shared with you that, like, recently making some big life decisions, not having her there, has been hard. But what I had to do, and I'm sure what you do, is you channel them, right? You go, what would she or he, what kind of advice would they give me, right?
I also find, and I don't know if you find this, I hear that advice, not literally, but I know what they would say because we had such great relationships that I know what my mom would say.
Absolutely.
When I go to the grocery store, like I went yesterday, and this is on a very superficial level, but just an example, I looked awful. I had no makeup on. I rolled on a bed, brought Quinn to my daughter to school, and I ran into someone I knew, and I heard my mother's voice, "Sloane, get yourself together.
Yes.
Put on some lipstick."
Yes.
And so there's things where my mother always comes to me, and I even though they're gone,
they're with you.
They are with me. Yes, they are with me.
No, my mom would say the same thing. I tell you, there's one jewelry store that I always go in to get repairs, and every time I go in, I'm coming right from yoga, and it's cold, and I have a hat on, and I look horrible, and I always run into people, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot go there without proper, looking like I'm a human being.
And there's silly things too. Last night, for example, my youngest wanted to wear a sweatshirt to school, and it was in the wash, and she said, "Can't we just put it in the dryer?" I said, "No, we're going to bed." She said, "Well, why can't we put it in the dryer?" I said, "Well, because Grandma always says you don't put
leave
something
the dryer on while you're sleeping because it could start a fire, right?"
Yes. And so they're with us always.
Yeah.
It sure would like to give them a hug, right? Sure would love to be able to talk with them, but what a gift that we've had these relationships with our parents to be able to feel their presence.
And I think you're right. The lessons that grief gives us kind of probably helped you make your transition, in that you realize how strong you are. You realize if you could get through that, you can do anything. I think that a lot. As I helped my mom through hospice, you helped your dad through hospice. That you have survived something, right? You have been through something, and therefore everything else that the world throws at you, you got this, right?
And that life is fleeting.
Yeah.
We've only got one shot at it. And so you're going to let fear hold you back?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yes.
Let's do this.
What do you got to lose?
So one of the things I ask all my guests is, a lot of women at our age, and I'm a little bit older than you, but not much. We're in the same generation. They feel stuck. They feel like, especially if they've been stay-at-home moms and they haven't had an opportunity to work outside the home, they feel like they're not relevant. Like nobody's tapping into what they have, whatever that wisdom is, that strength, that energy. So what kind of advice do you give women who want to start a new chapter, but they're just not sure how to do it?
Well, I think that relevant comment we could talk about for days, right? Because the media, social media in particular, in our society tells us what is relevant. And I think that women of our age have so much to offer. My mom always used to say that her best years were her 40s and 50s. She really came into her own and had wisdom that she didn't have when she was younger. My grandfather used to say, "Youth is wasted on the young."
You hear that. There's a reason stereotypical expressions and cliches exist, right? Because they're true.
Yes. But I would say my best advice would be to just get still and get quiet, and to really listen to what you're hearing and
what your heart's telling you.
Yes.
What the universe is telling you.
Yes. And I felt like I heard a a whisper that was in my soul in my 40s that, I'm not really happy with my job in local news right now. What am I going to do? And then that whisper got increasingly louder during COVID. And
you couldn't ignore it.
You couldn't ignore it. You just have to listen. And another great bit of advice I got from another recovering broadcast journalist, Tamara Gibbs, who was a reporter at WTVD.
Sure, I know Tamara.
And she said to me one time, when I was talking with her about, what's the next step, she said, well, what sets your soul on fire? And I was like, whoa.
Right, like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think sometimes asking yourself that, you don't need to know the answer right away, but ask yourself that question and ask it again. And then be still and listen to see what comes to the surface.
Yeah.
I think beneath it all, we're very busy nowadays in this digital world, and there's a lot of messages coming at us. And sometimes we just have to be still and quiet. And when we are, it will come to us.
And that's hard. That's really hard for people who are go, go, go people,
yes,
hair on fire people to do. And I've really been working on that. I thought the other day, and I hadn't thought about this in so long, when I was little, I had an old cassette recorder. I'm really dating myself. And I used to do shows on the recorder. And I also did post-read commercials. So I would take the dishwashing liquid and do, a commercial. And I always thought I was going to be a talk show host. And so for most of my career, I imagined that would be on TV. And then that became kind of a pipe dream. And then all of a sudden I went, wait a minute, I'm a podcast host, which is a talk show, which is exactly what we're doing, which is what I've been doing for the last year.
Full circle.
In my job. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the thing that sets my soul on fire. So I think that's some really great advice. I love hearing the advice from my guests because everybody has a different take on it. And I just think it informs people, and women can really relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last question I'm going to ask you that I ask everyone is, what haven't you done that you still want to do? Is there anything out there? Is there a dream? And it doesn't have to be work related, just something that you're like, gosh, I want to climb a mountain. I want to do whatever, travel, whatever it is.
I'm really working hard at being more present. I'm really trying to do that because I do realize with the loss of my parents how quickly this life flies by, how fast these kids grow up. So I'm really trying to be present. I'm really trying to let fear not hold me back anymore. I let fear hold me back for a long time, and I'll go back to Oprah. Oprah says that all emotions come from only two emotions, fear and love. So ask yourself if something is stopping you or something is happening in your life, what is the motivating factor? Is it fear or love? And fear can really be
paralyzing,
that holds you back.
Sure.
And I think that the biggest risk in life now, I look at it because I was really fearful because I thought, what if I fail?
Sure.
I also, Amanda, so much of my identity was wrapped up as WRAL Sloane Heffernan, and who am I if I'm not WRAL Sloane Heffernan? Well, the ego was certainly getting in the way, and once I was able to reconcile that, I realized that
to not lead with that when you go somewhere, to just lead with, this is who I am.
Yes, yes.
And be good with that.
Yes, but the ego played a major role, and now I recognize that, don't be afraid of taking risks, because I look at it like this, that the biggest risk you can take
is not taking it.
Yes!
Yeah.
Yes, because what is going to happen? Even if you do fail, like in hindsight now, I look back and I'm like, big deal if you fail. We learn more from our failures than we do from our successes, right?
Yeah, I think, and one of my guests recently said, just go to the worst case scenario and get that over with.
Yeah.
Which is, okay, this doesn't work out. Yeah. Okay, then I'll do something else.
Yes.
So.
I will also say that, I do preface it with, it's very easy for me to say I have a great partner who could pay the mortgage if this didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get you. I hear you.
And even with that, I was terrified. So I can't imagine being someone who is willing to take a great risk and have the weight of, their family's financial future on their shoulders. But I encourage maybe baby steps then. I didn't take the leap right away. There were some things that I did that I sort of put my toes in the water a little bit to see if I liked it and if it was going to be successful. And so I did test the waters a little bit. So
you prepared.
I did prepare. Yes, I prepared. And but to answer your question, other than being present, I would say that I would love to follow in your footsteps and maybe write a book one day. And I would love to do some public speaking, because one thing that I do find is that our stories inspire others. And I think by working with people to help them tell their stories, that's only going to help others, and it leads to connection and growth, and it's powerful.
And seeing people in person is something so different when you're used to talking to a television camera.
Yes.
Having a live audience react, there's nothing like it.
Yes.
There's nothing like it. Sloane, this has been such a treat, and you're such a gift to me as a friend. And I really appreciate you doing this, because I think your words will touch so many women who listen to this show. So thank you for being here today.
The feeling is mutual. It has been a pleasure. I'm not surprised that you are so awesome at podcasting. And so thank you so much. And I treasure our friendship as well. Thank you.